Joining us now, David Schoen, civil liberties attorney. By the way, he's also now working on Roger Stone's case, and former board member of the Alabama Civil Liberties Union. Horace Cooper, legal commentator, co-chair, of the Black Leadership Network Project 21, author of a soon-to-be-released book, How Trump is Making Black America Great Again. Welcome, both of you, back to the program. Eliminating chokeholds, more training, looking for new technologies, non-lethal options for police that are effective, and hopefully that means less death in these encounters. That obviously wouldn't have helped in the George Floyd case. None of that ever should have happened. We all agree on that. But let me start with you, Horace, and ask you about the president's reforms today. I think the database idea is good, too, because we keep finding out cops involved in a lot of these incidents have a long history of this.
Transparency, information gathering is always good. It's great for local communities. It's great for the media to put in context what's happening. I am a big fan of it, and I know the president has been striving as much as possible to demonstrate that this federal government is interested in the lives and livelihoods of Black Americans just as much as it is for the rest. This is another good example of that.
And, I just think a lot of it's overdue. David, we always talk about, we learn a lot of things. We learned a lot with coronavirus. You don't put COVID-19 patients in nursing homes and long-term care facilities like New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and, Governor shut down Whitmer. They made a lot of dumb decisions. Very different down in Florida, where they literally used every agency and the National Guard early to go into those facilities to protect the most vulnerable. So we learn things. For example, it infuriates me that the Gardner case ever came about. Why? Why are we wasting, precious police time going after a guy selling a Lucy cigarette? It's stupid. The whole thing was totally, completely, utterly stupid and unnecessary. What this cop did in the case in New York was horrific. You get different circumstances, different times. I like body cams. I like more training. I like some of the ideas that the president, accountability, a national database on cops if they're having incidents of accusations of misconduct, et cetera. And again, new technologies that are non-lethal. I like all of that.
Yeah.
David.
Yeah. Well, you're right on. I've read about some of your suggestions. You're right on track. The president is on track today. This idea of outside accountability is key. There's only so much, though, a president can do. So much of this is on a local level. It matters that he cares and that he's acting. Let me give you real quickly a case that's a paradigm for the kinds of problems he's identified and that hopefully would be fixed. Jermaine McBean is a young 33-year-old information technology engineer, African-American, living in Broward County, Florida. He has, for a hobby, he gets an air gun. He's walking home with it. He's stopped by 3 cops who end up shooting him and killing him. As that case develops, we see the cops lying about it. We find out that the Broward County Sheriff's Office under Sheriff Israel has 66 officers charged or investigated for crimes like kidnapping, robbery, rape, assault, all sorts of things. Law enforcement officers. One officer on that department killed a man, put back on the force, 3 weeks later, killed someone else. Accountability and outside investigation would matter. There were 167 civilians killed in Broward County in the 30 years that the prosecutor was the prosecutor leading up to this killing. Not one officer ever was disciplined or indicted until the killer of Jermaine McBean was indicted, Peter Peraza. He gets indicted, and now the police union takes over. These police unions are incredibly powerful. They help put the judge in office. He gets indicted for killing Jermaine McBean, and he claims stand your ground. There's no business for a law enforcement officer to have stand-your-ground immunity, so the case gets assigned to a local state judge put in office by the union, moonlights with the defense lawyer in the case, and he undoes what the grand jury did. He dismisses the entire case on stand-your-ground with phony findings. That's what infuriates the public, and that's what greater accountability does. And by the way, the Obama Justice Department did nothing in that case. So let's not talk about what could have been. I contacted them. They're fully aware of what happened. They said, well, they would watch and monitor. The prosecutor caught the lead chief investigator committing perjury in the case. No consequences. There's only so much national can do. The accountability the president talks about is key.
I think the accountability issue, and I think to become a more perfect union, Horace, this is what we do. We see what we do right. We see what we do wrong. Banning chokeholds. I went into this, and I was watching Dan Bongino earlier on Fox today, and he was talking about a trachehold, very different. If I put you in a trachehold, you're going to die. I mean, if I'm doing it and I know how to do it right, I would never do it. Unless my very life was in imminent danger, I wouldn't go near it. A carotid chokehold, rear naked choke, as they call it, in the octagon. Under the right circumstances, you would use it. But the person would pass out, and then you just let your hands free, and the person is likely just going to try not feel good for a day, but stand up and be fine. So there are ways to do it, but I don't think the training is there and exists for every cop to do it right. And so just only under real danger is it going to be allowed? And I think that's actually a good idea, because there's no other outcome. If you put your knee on a guy's neck like George Floyd and pound his face into the pavement, that person will die every single time, every time. And the fact that he even lived as long as he did is a shocker.
Yeah. Well, there's no doubt about that. We absolutely are benefiting from being able to see this circumstance and this situation and see what reforms we need to make with regard to things like chokeholds and a database that will track. But there are conversations that we might want to have that I once had actually on a program you may remember. It was called Hannity and Combs way back when Bill Clinton was president, and we were talking about this issue of giving law enforcement more responsibilities. Since the 1990s, we have expanded the kinds of things and the scope of responsibilities of law enforcement. That has required us to have more manpower needed, and that has meant that we have, in many instances, had a lower level of skill. Why do we need police officers to enforce a tobacco tax? Why, when the mayor of New York says that you can't have a large sugary beverage, is that something for law enforcement? Why is misgendering something that we bring law enforcement in? Let's let law enforcement handle rapes and robbery and the kinds of things that are traditionally associated with it, and you can then maintain a high caliber, quality level of law enforcement participation. But if law enforcement is going to be the tax collector for the welfare state, and we need ever more amounts of revenue, you're going to have more and more people, and that means by natural nature that you're going to lower the standards.
I will tell you, look, I'm not getting into, I think that the real issue, and it's not, all these guys spend time in the range when they're going through school, but then they have to requalify, for example, for their shooting part and license part, David. Well, first I want you to respond to Horace, and then I want you to say, why aren't they getting continuing education all through their careers? Like every 3 months, every 6 months, every 12 months. The new technology's out there, David, and I put it on TV and radio last week in one case, but go ahead.
No, you're right. First of all, you want me to respond to Horace. He's absolutely right. And you can make the same case for some of what's going on in the schools. None of the cops are in the schools particularly want to be there, and they're, treating like a crime at times, disciplinary problems. So, yeah, they've gone beyond their scope. Let me make this point first, though, which I know is very important to you, Mr. Hannity. Cops are still our heroes. There's nothing new about what's going on today. This stuff's been going on for a long time, and it's going to happen in any kind of institution, either out of panic, lack of training, or bullyism. It happens, and there's only so much, again, we can do about that. There have been chokehold cases in City of Los Angeles versus Lyons 30 years ago and more, but the cops remain our heroes. And that's very important. With all of this talk lately with Antifa and the defunding, we've got to remember that at all times. Now, you're right about the training. There are programs for regular training, regular requalifying, and all of that, but not enough. New Orleans Police Department has some pioneering programs going on now with social services type training, psychological type training. But all you need is one incident to have this blow up. And so it's not unimaginable that there can be one bad officer on one police department in the country, and we see a bad incident that's caught on video now. And again, it does remind us of what happens. It also must remind us of all of the good ones out there, too.
Let me ask you, David, on a legal side, because, I went over the law in Georgia in very great detail. You're familiar with it. And, defining, they're looking to charge this officer with either murder or felony murder. Prosecutors often have this tendency to overcharge, and then they create expectations of a specific verdict that's never going to come. What are your thoughts on the law specifically based on what we went over in great detail on radio and TV yesterday?
Yeah, well, this case is still unfolding. I personally think the idea of charging felony murder in this case is a big mistake. That means a murder was committed in the course of a felony. In this case, they're claiming he assaulted the man first and then committed the murder. That's not what happened here. What happened here is an absolute tragedy, and the forensics indicate the man was shot in the back. That's not permitted under clearly established law, under the criminal law or civil law. That's clear. We don't know yet whether he actually fired a taser or didn't fire a taser. If he fired a taser can be considered a deadly weapon. There's a case going through the circuit right now in the U.S. Court of Appeals, the 11th Circuit, where a man grabbed a taser and the police officer got qualified immunity because he feared for his life and that sort of thing. You know that politically they're going to end up charging murder in this case, obviously some variety of homicide, but probably murder because of the shots in the back. We just have to see how it plays out. The criminal justice system is a very blunt instrument. It's not the most effective instrument for dealing with these problems.
Well, I think we've got to protect our cops. We got to protect the people in our streets. What do you do about what's happening in Seattle when they take over streets? Horace.
Well, let me just echo a little bit about the criminal justice system. I'm really, really troubled, really quick to just say it has been troubling to see that prosecutors are looking at the facts of the case and bringing them forward, instead responding to pressure. When we get to that point, and I have a piece out on Newsmax talking about this, when we get to that point, we're jeopardizing everyone because at any point, any of us can become unpopular. Now, I was very, very dismayed by the fact that the governor and the mayor in Seattle decided that if you are upset and would like to protest, that it's okay to occupy property that is not yours to occupy, whether it's government-owned or whether it's private persons that own it. In no way should the governor or the mayor allow that to take place. Now, did we need a SWAT team within the first hour? No, we didn't. But what we didn't need is to, quote, let it play out. That is sending a terrible signal, and that will likely have consequences.
Well, I agree. But it's the governor and mayor's call. President just keeps offering help, rightly. All right, David Schoen, Horace Cooper, thank you both. When we come back, wide open phones